live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
Blake, I'm excited to talk about this Penn State-Ohio State game. I think it is going to have, is not a hot take to say this, is going to have huge implications on the playoff, on the Big Ten title race. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, a little bit of a spoiler. I don't know if Ohio State's going to win this one, Blake. This game could end up being an unexpected outcome depending on what happens with Drew Aller.
Yeah, and that's a big if and a big ask and a big question. What happens with Drew Aller? Excuse me, I'm coughing over here like I got emphysema or something. I don't know. But you are correct. It's going to be one hell of a game. I hate that this game is at noon or 11 Central. I hate when we do that. This is a massive, massive matchup. But, Joe, as the old saying goes, October is for contenders. I mean, October is for pretenders. November is for contenders. Who is going to separate themselves here? This is going to be a big game that we talk about. Penn State versus Ohio State. Can Ohio State run the football? I mean, that it comes down to that. If you're asking Will Howard, who I think has been more than serviceable, if you're asking him to lead you to a Big Ten championship, I'm not saying that he can't, because he's got Megatron Jr. and Megatron Sr. on both edges or both corners, okay? And at the boundary, we'll see. But it's a lot to talk about here. I mean, we might go a little long on a segment that we don't normally go on. It's a massive game here. I don't think people are understand the magnitude, but we will and are going to get with it here.
Yeah, a lot of implications for this game. Timing is tough for Ohio State with the offensive line injuries that they're dealing with. Yep. It sounds like there's not really a lot of confidence, but at the same time, we have no idea what the situation is with Aller, so it's not like both these teams are coming into it completely healthy. Last thing that you mentioned there, though, it does suck that this game's at noon. I wish this was a night game. It would be ridiculous if it was at Penn State with a whiteout at night, but instead we're getting it at noon.
Yeah, I don't like it one bit. But it's not the only Big Ten game that we're going to talk about, too, Joe. The number one team in the country finally going to get another test going across the country here. Oregon versus Michigan.
Yes, and I think Oregon, please, social team, don't do this to again. Do this to us again. I think Oregon is going to win big. I think that Oregon is going to kick the crap out of Michigan. I am not feeling this Michigan team, and they are not a good matchup for this Oregon squad.
They're not at all. So we're going to get to that. But listen, I hope the real thing gets clipped on what we're going to say about Oregon tonight. I am still pretty upset and petty about that one, but we will talk Oregon and Michigan here. Joe, there are some big games in the SEC this week, too. Nobody wants to talk about it. A&M taking on South Carolina. We'll talk about that one tomorrow. But the largest cocktail party is taking place this weekend. Georgia and Florida take hold.
I don't think anyone's really expecting Florida to come into this game and shock anyone. It feels like we've talked about this a lot, that Georgia's starting to really hit their stride. However, we do know rivalry game like this, Georgia has played down to some of their opponents so far this year. So I'm not going to be quick to jump and title this video why Georgia is going to blow out Florida, but they play to their potential. They play the way that we know that they're so much better than Florida. Then yes, this game should be incredibly lopsided.
So I'm going to say this. I'm not with you on Georgia this week. I need to see Carson Beck do something that he hasn't shown me in a big game this year. You ready?
Yeah.
Don't turn the ball over, because you know how you keep teams that aren't as good as you in the mix? You start turning the ball over. Right. So you're right on paper, and by eye test, you are correct. Georgia should splatter them all over Jacksonville. The problem is that I need to see Carson Beck in a primetime situation. I say primetime, but a situation where you're not turning the football over. I hope that we get that from him, because look, I mean, they gotta figure something out there. Miami and Duke too here, Joe. Listen, Miami is interesting, and we continue to talk about him, and for good reason. But man, are you going to allow another team that has no business hitting explosive plays on you this week? Is that going to be Duke? Are you going to do it again? Can you finally show me that you've turned a page defensively?
No, it's not going to be Duke. It's not going to be Duke. This Duke team has been one of those very lucky teams. They weren't hanging around with SMU if it wasn't for, I think it was 6 turnovers that SMU had in that game against Duke. It would not have been as tight as it was if it wasn't for that. This Duke team's good. Their offensive line's been playing well. Their defense has been making some plays, but there is going to be a separation. There's going to be a pretty big talent separation. This one I'm not afraid to declare as a blowout, especially because it's a home game for Miami. It's not like the Louisville game, like the Virginia Tech game that were potential traps for them, or even the Cal game when those games were on the road.
I'm not with you. I'm just not. I'm not.
Duke's
with
not
you.
that good. Duke has a very arbitrary resume.
You know who else isn't that good?
Who?
Cal. I mean, Joe, we're starting to.
That is a completely different situation. There's a completely different situation. They're not going across the country to go play Duke.
Virginia Tech's not a good football team. I mean, Joe, they're playing down to the level of their opponent, whether you want to like it or not. In the last month, hold on. I can name them. The last month they played to the level of every single opponent that they've had. And here's the truth: it's come down to the wire against everybody. And here's what I'm going to say: should you blow them out? Yes, you should blow them out. Here's the problem: 1 week you do it, okay, whatever. 2 weeks you do it, all right. Stop playing around, Joe. They've done this the last month, my guy. Right?
I was incredibly right when I said that this is this year's Washington, because you can't give them credit. You can't give them credit. They're
I picked them to win the conference, but there's a massive difference. There is a massive difference in what Washington did last year by beating Oregon in the middle of the season in a thriller of a game when they haven't even played a ranked opponent yet, Joe. I mean, you consider Louisville not to be a ranked opponent. So we're getting to a point where you can talk about Washington. You're right. Yeah. But this is Cal. Their big names are Cal, Virginia Tech, Louisville. It's not the same. I
get all that. But this Duke team is an extremely arbitrary 6-2. They're not going to be the challenge that is going to be given to them.
No, but hold on. I didn't say that they were going to win. I said, is Miami going to continue to allow big plays? They're 127th in the country in explosive play rate defensively. 127th. So
but
again,
that hasn't held them back. It doesn't hurt them.
Pause. Yes, it has held them back, because what Cam Ward is providing for them in the #1 overall offense in the country, these games should not be this close. Don't tell me it's not affecting them. It is affecting them.
They're allowing these plays, yes, but for the way that this team performs offensively, it has not been that big of an issue. And again, it's eerily similar to Washington last year, where Washington was big points, big plays, highlights every single week, but their defense was giving up similar situations to their opponents and keeping the games close. Look, I know that it is nerve-wracking to try and track and trying to keep up with, but there's still, I really just, more importantly with this game specifically, I don't think that Duke is probably one of the weakest teams that they've played so far this year.
Well, look, I just got a question from the Crib 305. We're 14th in defense. Well, #1, you haven't played a ranked opponent, but #2, it doesn't stop where you're having to fight at the end of games to win them. So you explain that to me. If you explain to me why you are in dogfights with Louisville, who's not a good football team, and Cal and Virginia Tech, then you explain that one to me. It's because you're giving up explosive plays. You're dead last in the ACC. Actually, you're dead last in the P4, Joe, and giving up explosive plays. You're down there with UMass, my guy.
It's an issue. I think they're going to be fine.
Okay. Let's get to it. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. Share to all those groups if you're on Facebook and all those social media pages. Joe mentions ever so closely to 11K subs on YouTube. It was only 2 weeks ago that we were just like, hey, man, thank you. We're over 10K, and now we're almost at 11. So do us a favor. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Some of you are watching, not subscribing. You got to hit that subscribe button and notification bell wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. We come back and preview Penn State, Ohio State next. Stay with us.
BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag.
We're back. I think I pissed off Miami fans.
You're doing it to yourself.
I'm not doing it to myself. There's got to be a part there. Okay, here's the truth. And this goes for me interacting with people on social media and here, wherever I have a take. Your team, no team is flawless at the current moment. There is something that every team in America has a massive problem with, every one of them. So before we get to Miami and before we get to Duke, okay, it's been a month. I asked the question of, can you show me that you don't allow explosive plays? That's what I asked. Didn't say that they were losing. Picked them to win the ACC. Picked them to be in the playoff. Picked them to be one of the top contenders. But yet, oh, Blake, you can't point out our one flaw. Oh.
Well, I don't think you're wrong for pointing out the flaw, but the whole argument that I have against you, and I for people commenting, oh, the hate is like that's not true. But the point that you just made, that no team is perfect, every team has an issue. Miami's been fine to this point despite that issue. They find ways to win despite that issue. I just feel like you're kind of painting it as if that it's going to eventually catch up to them. I don't think that's the case. I don't think it will. I think that they have a very
not what I said. I said, can you show me that you can stop giving up explosive plays? That's the fourth time I brought it up.
All right.
I mean, it is. Golly. I feel like I'm in the Lil Wayne song where he says, oh, I'm just a soul who is misunderstood. Maybe a little bit before you did. You were probably in junior high when the Carter 3 came.
Probably.
All right. Penn State and Ohio State teed up at noon, Joe. One of the biggest games in the Big Ten this year. Arguably is for a lot of reasons. I mean, but you did have Oregon versus Ohio State. That was a big one too. But this is the second premier matchup in the Big Ten this year. Big question is, how is Drew Allar's health status? That is going to be the number one talking point throughout this week. Where is he at now? He didn't come back in the second half. They actually were still okay at quarterback. Andy Kotelnicki got some things going. And be honest with you, I don't know if the backup wasn't really a little bit more better fit for his offense. That's neither here nor there. But Ohio State and Penn State this weekend, Joe, how do you see it playing?
Yeah, the first big thing here that you just brought up, Drew Allar's availability is going to be so critical for the outcome of this game. If he plays, and you brought up a good point here, Bo Perula, he played fantastically. He is a nice piece for this offense, and for the ability to have him to call upon if you're down and Drew Allar's hurt, that he's going to be able to play good enough to keep the offense moving and on schedule. But we know that Allar is the better player of the two. He is going to be able to take your offense to a different level like we've seen so far this season. That's why having Allar is important. Outside of that, assuming that he plays, game time decision, one would assume that's just a ploy being used by James Franklin and the coaching staff to leave the ambiguity in that decision. I can't help but be hyper-focused on Blake, on the injuries that Ohio State has been suffering on their offensive line. They're down 2 left tackles. They're going to be shuffling a lot of guys around to figure out which unit they're going to be sending out there.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, as we said yesterday, after the Penn State performance against Wisconsin, this Penn State defense is really good. They are extremely stout and extremely dominant. They are not allowing many teams to pick up explosive plays at all. They're allowing 5.74 yards per attempt on passing plays, only 93 rushing yards per game. They are the epitome of consistency. And it all comes down to the biggest part here. Without a left tackle, you're going up against the best defensive end to this point this year in Abdul Carter. I don't know if I can trust your offensive line to slow down Abdul Carter. That there, right there, Blake, is my biggest focus. And I think the biggest talking point for this game, being at home with one of the loudest crowds in college football, this could be a really tough out for the offense if they're not able to protect Will Howard and if they're not able to run the ball the way that we saw them struggle against Nebraska.
I mean, look, man, if you're having offensive line issues and you can't run the football, Penn State is not the team that you need to be playing. No. It really isn't. And I think everybody knows that. I think, but Joe, I got to be real with you. What Will Howard shows up? Like which one? Is it the one that went 13 of 16 last game and was dotting up dudes? Like, is that the guy that's going to be there? Because, Joe, at some point, what Ohio State has out wide, the freak of natures that they have out wide is going to take over a football game for them. I don't know if it's this week. I don't know if it's in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I have no Big Ten title game. I don't know. The problem is that if you don't have time to get it to them, they're useless. And now you can't run the football. So, Joe, I got to be real with you. You're in a place where I don't know what you're going to do if you're Ohio State. But what I do think is that Will Howard has actually, Joe, despite not having a running game, despite having some bad and leaky situations along his offensive line, Joe, he's been more than effective, right? Like he's been able to get you in positive plays. I'm with you on Abdul Carter. It's the same thing that I wrote down here. I don't Joe, when I look at this game, he can be a game wrecker or somebody at Ohio State fixes it. Here's what I'd say, though, too. What's interesting. You are giving Ryan Day and Chip Kelly a week to figure something out. They know that they have an issue. How does two really good offensive minds cover up an issue? I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. But, Joe, if they can't establish a run and you're putting this whole thing on Will Howard's shoulders, I mean, it does come down to him. But, Joe, the thing that I can't get out of my head, too, here, though, is Allar might not be there. And where I saw a backup last week come in and perform very well, actually, we saw two backups come in last week in prime time and play really well, and him and Marcel Reed. But I look at the situation when you have Ohio State that can game plan a little bit more for him. How do they exploit that? So as much as I am on the Ohio State side, like, man, I got questions on them offensively. How is their offensive line going to perform? I got to be real with you, Joe. I say this every time we talk about Ohio State. I think that they have a guard issue. You're giving up way too much penetration on run plays. I mean, Ryan Day even alluded to it in the postgame press conference. He's like, well, you gave up too much penetration in the running game. So as much as I worry about the issues that Ohio State may have, not having Allar is just as equal, if not a little bit more. So, but I get that we look at a backup quarterback and say, well, look, man, he destroyed it in the second half. You're right, 1,000%. And Penn State presents so many challenges for Ohio State. Joe, I don't know how to feel about this because whatever team is able to answer that question the best is going to be the winner in this one. Now, Joe, they've had some issues, Ohio State, on third down. You were talking about Abdul Carter earlier. They're tied for 37th in third down efficiency. Where did Oregon make a living in moments? Third downs. Get after him. So, look, it's the worst thing that Ohio State does from a statistical analysis standpoint. They're worse. They're one of the worst thing that they do is stay on the field on third down. So, listen, man, if that pass rush can get off, it could be a long night in a hostile environment.
That's again, and it's just the most key thing to like really lock in on here is how does your offensive line perform? How does your offensive line handle this situation? And it's not just Abdul Carter. I know some people are pointing out that Danny Dennis Sutton was hurt last game. I don't know what his availability is. So it's not like this Penn State team is fully, completely healthy. But they still have talent. You know, they have talent across the board on their D line. They've got talent at linebacker. They're in a position here, and there's not really much of a gap like anyone would expect between these two teams. I'm going to just keep repeating it. Abdul Carter is the most important player in this game. Allar's availability, I understand why anyone's going to bring this up. We're recording this on a Monday, so we don't know what the situation is. The current guess is that it will be a game time decision. I do feel like the Beau Pribula who stepped in, that he could play well enough at home with the crowd supporting him that could keep this game close within a range for them to win it late. Like, I think that the way that he played against Wisconsin, and you mentioned this in the lead-in, he fits with what Andy Kotelnicki tries to do offensively. He is more like
Kansas.
Right. He's more like Jalen Daniels athletically than Drew Allar is. There's a huge difference in their body types. The only thing that worries me about Beau Pribula, though, he had a lot of throws in that game against Wisconsin that he was able to get away with that are not going to happen, are not going to be successful against that Ohio State defense, against the safeties and the athletic, rangy linebackers like Sonny Styles and all those dudes. If he tries to throw into a tight, risky window that ekes over somebody like he did against Wisconsin, it's getting picked off. So that's one thing to monitor if Beau Pribula is the guy who starts at quarterback and if Drew Allar doesn't play.
Yeah, and I mean, even if he does, for what it's worth, how, number one, regardless of when it's announced that he will or won't play, okay, how healthy is he? I mean, clearly he wasn't healthy in a moderately close game for him to go back in there. Unless they knew that they were just going to run away with it in the second half, I don't know, okay? But I look at this game too. In one area, Joe, I do think that if Ohio State is able to protect, let's just say hypothetically, so I think that they're going to be able to throw the ball here. I do. Like, man, I'm not saying that they're the best in the country, meaning that wide receiver core at Ohio State, but man, they got dudes, Joe. They got freak of natures over there. So here's the thing. If you're Penn State, you kind of need to play a little bit of keep away early too, because they're going to test you. I feel like that they're going to come out and test and see how this thing's working out and then formulate a game plan on how they're going to do things. But, man, I look at Penn State, and I know that their defense and secondary has been good. But, man, I just think that you have weapons for Ohio State, whether it be the true freshman, whether it be Mbuka, regardless of who it is, and Jeremiah Smith, obviously the freshman I'm talking about, whoever it is, I think that they got a massive advantage there. Those receivers have been really good. Now, I will say this. There was one thing, Joe, that I felt like going back and rewatching that game today, I kind of was questioning, like, how locked in was Emeka Egbuka? Like, did you see that? Like, letting up on some rush, on some, like, routes? Like, I went back and watched it today, and Drew and Will Howard almost gets picked, and he's, like, slowing down on a route. And I'm like,
I think you might be nitpicking that just a little bit.
I mean, the ball almost got picked because he stopped. I mean, so I get what you're saying. Anyway.
I'm just trying to save you from commenters getting pissed off at you.
You mean Elks?
Well, I'm sure that there's more than just.
Anyway,
Elks is being surprisingly
quiet.
Friendly. Well, not quiet. He's commenting plenty, but I'm surprised that he's not uber mad at us for basically picking against Ohio State.
I didn't pick against Ohio State yet. All I'm saying
I gotta be honest with you. I am picking against Ohio State. If Allar doesn't play. Yeah, I was inadvertent. If Drew Allar does not play, I pick Ohio State. If Drew Allar plays and he plays a good game and whatever injury that he has and it's not as serious doesn't hold him back, I'm going with Penn State. I mean, there's a lot of things that are playing in their favor here.
Yeah, I'm not on a Monday. I'm not ready to make a decision on that because clearly I don't have enough information on Allar playing. Okay. But you can make that argument to me that even if Allar does play, I still don't know if they can slow down this Ohio State team when they're hitting on all functions. I don't know that. I really don't. I got to be real with you. I know that they had running game issues last week. How are they going to mask that? I mean, there's so many different things. Like Ohio State, we don't get this from them much. They do have some moments where they're bad and inconsistent and things like that. But now you have a coaching staff who has been in these situations before and can be creative. It's time for the creative playbook to come out. Everything you got is out here. I get what you're saying. If I'm Penn State, I am worried about Megatron on the outside. That's what I'm worried about. So the last thing that I would look at in this game too, Joe, both defenses have been very stout, right? Penn State and Ohio State, both defenses have been really good. Is there any reason that I look at this game and say that I wouldn't bet the under? Right? Like, I think both offenses have had some struggles, injuries, whatever. And I'm like, man, this might be a low-scoring dogfight. Like, we might get Big Ten, old-school dogfight here. And I do think that Penn State's a little bit more healthier in the trenches offensively, for sure. That, man, if we got into like an old physical shootout, I think depth and health does play a little bit of a edge here.
And I also, in that line, for Ohio State winning this game, one of the big advantages that they might have is that Penn State hasn't faced a front seven nearly this good. And inversely,
no, they have not been tested like this, to your point.
Ohio State has dealt with an opposing team's rushing attack that had success against them. So they have had time to figure out and to correct, and they've played better games since the Oregon game. I can't even think of like who's even the closest front seven that's challenged Penn State. I don't think there's really anyone who's in the stratosphere of Ohio State.
I would say one, but you will clown it, and I'm not.
USC.
Yeah, because Joe, I still think that they have.
But that's not it. But that's not anywhere. That's still not anywhere close to Ohio State.
No, you asked me what outside of Ohio State who would be the toughest, and I would say, I mean, look, I don't think USC's front seven sucks at all, but they're not Ohio State, and I think that's fair.
It's to this point though where Penn State's offensive success has been generated by the fact that they're able to run the ball creatively and better than most teams in the country. They're averaging almost 200 rush yards per game. They're deploying guys in some really, really unique manners to the point where you've got tackles lining up in the slot, leaving these massive splits between them and the guard, and then trying to create confusion. I don't know if that's going to work against a defensive line that is as athletic and as smart and as experienced as they are. That could be a big turning point for what you're talking about here. This game being low scoring and Ohio State just needing one big play from Emeka Egbuka or Jeremiah Smith to crack it open and win it for them.
I'm telling you, dude, brother, if you're leaky in their secondary, you're in trouble.
Why are people saying that Ohio State's off a bye?
I don't know. I mean, they literally almost lost to Nebraska last week. I unless I'm reading that wrong, I don't know. But yeah. All right. Let's get to another one here. Oregon let's just stay in the Big Ten. Can we stay in the Big Ten here?
Yeah.
Let's stay in the Big Ten. Oregon and Michigan this weekend, Joe. Oregon still the reigning #1 team in the country, coming off a very spectacular win against Illinois, and Michigan beating their rival in Michigan State last week. Your thoughts on the game?
First most important aspect to this, Oregon is at this spot that we keep repeating, and it's going to sound redundant. They're at the spot where the trap game, it's not on the radar for them. They are not dealing with some underlying issues that have not been pulled out yet. The issues that they had were in the first couple of weeks, and it feels like they have determined what they need to do in order to play their best football. Plain and simple, Blake, if Michigan does get stops, if Michigan does create turnovers in some ways, I don't have any faith whatsoever that this Michigan offense can put enough points up on the board to keep this game close.
100%.
They don't, plain and simple. And we've mentioned this before. That secondary for Michigan has not played well. They have given up an abundance of passing yards to a number of different opponents. Oregon right now, Dylan Gabriel is playing at an elite level, 76% completion percent with 18 touchdowns. They have been phenomenal. Did I just cut out? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a second, but you're back.
Blake,
Joe,
am I
can you
still
hear
here?
me? Yeah, can you hear me? All right. We're gonna let Joe come back and then let him come back in here. My thoughts on the game here are pretty simple. When I look at Oregon versus Michigan, I look at obviously Joe was right in what he just said. Okay. He's right in the sense of that I don't think that there you go.
I have no idea what happened. That's never happened before. Where did I get cut off?
I don't remember.
Okay, continue what you were saying. Sorry.
Okay. Joe, I actually agree with you. I don't think that Michigan's going to be able to score enough points. Here's the question I do have coming into this game. Okay. So, Oregon social media team, you can clip this one. The one thing that Michigan has done well so far, Joe, is stop the run. They're 15th in the country in run defense. That is something that they have done. Other than that, Joe, they have been very average or below average in everything else that they're doing. Joe, they can't throw the football, at least not effectively enough. It's really affected their run game. They're 124th in the country in total offense. I mean, Joe, defensively, I get what you're saying in their secondary that they've been leaky. They haven't been great. They're still in the top 30s, man. I get what you're saying, but the offense is putting them on the field a lot. And because they can't get anything generated and going. I think that the thing that comes to mind when we were talking about this last night in reference to games we're talking about today, Oregon, for me, has one thing and one thing only why I continue to I say support, but why I continue to have massive amounts of faith in them. It's DeLeone Gabriel, and I'm going to say it every week. When you have that much experience, you're playing Joe, he is the most, and I said this last night, I just want to reemphasize it. Outside of Cam Ward in the country, there is no other quarterback that has been this consistent. Nobody. I mean, he threw a pick or he threw a couple of picks, whatever. But in a game in, game out, specific thing, he has been very steady here. When I look at Oregon, even if I think that Michigan can stop their run game maybe early, I think that they're going to get things moving. I think they're going to be physical because they're going to lean on Michigan, and Michigan's going to break here. So when I look at Oregon, I think that the number one ranking that they have is definitely worthy. Continue to be the team that you are. Dan Lanning has constructed you to be the team that you are, and you are walloping dudes. Now, I look at the last thing I would say here too, Joe, is the one thing that Michigan has had massive amounts of struggles with that DeLeone Gabriel is a genius in. DeLeone Gabriel is phenomenal on third downs. He outright phenomenal. Their passing offense, when they throw the football on third downs, Joe, they're the number one in the country in conversion rate. If you can stay on the field, that's how you dominate. That's how you win big games. Want to know how Oregon beats Ohio State? Oh, well, here it is. Pro Football Focus, 10 of 12 on third down with a touchdown. That's how you win big games, right? Like that is how you continue to win big games. So, look, it's where I lean. I think Michigan can be tough and be a physical game for them. I just think that it's a bad matchup for Michigan because they can spread you out. They can throw it all over the place. And look, outside of Johnson, like you said, that secondary has been very vulnerable.
So where I got disconnected, you brought up the point that I really stick with here. This secondary for Michigan, it hasn't been great. It's been very inconsistent. It's been a lot leakier than we were expecting it to be this year because we thought that Will Johnson was just going to make everything okay despite them losing a bunch of guys to the NFL and to the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. DeLeone Gabriel has been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country. 76% completion percentage, 18 touchdowns. Since that rough, slow start, he has been amazing. And that passing attack is way too much for Michigan to keep up with. The biggest thing, to reiterate my opening point before my connection went out, Michigan does not, if they somehow find a way to get like a turnover or a big sack or whatever, to keep this thing close within range, they do not have the offense to score enough points to keep up with Oregon. Their defense is certainly well coached, and it's got a lot of premier talent, but it's not the defense from last year. This is a defense that's not going to slow down this unstoppable Oregon offense that we're seeing. If Ohio State could not do it, you are not going to be able to do it. Texas cakewalked all over you in Ann Arbor when they came to Ann Arbor. I think that game is going to be reminiscent. I know that was the beginning of the season, is going to be reflective of the way that Oregon's going to play in this game. It's just going to snowball, game over.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing for me, and we do this every week, and this is where we got clipped last time. So social media team, don't do it again. Joe, you said one thing in there that's very true. If you turn the football over, that's how you keep lesser teams with you. They're 86 in the country in passing yards allowed, though, Joe. Outside of Johnson, they've been bad, right? I mean, they have been bad a lot of places in their secondary. The only other thing that I would mention, too, Joe, they can still run the football a little bit. I mean, they're not anemic in running the football.
Right.
Like, they're not just so, like, when we look at Michigan, they're not just, like, so bad that they can't line up and get 4 yards, right?
Well,
like,
but the problem is, though, right now, Blake, with them is that last year they were able to win the time of possession battle because they were getting off the field so quickly, and then they were just holding onto the ball and slowing things down, and then J.J. McCarthy was able to make plays and extend drives and move the pocket and all those things and throw on the run. They can't do that right now. So, yeah, they can run the ball well, but every time that they get into these 3rd and long situations, they're effed. They're cooked. The drive's over.
Yeah.
Ball's going back to the other team. That's the problem.
I mean, look, I guess things were a little bit better last week, I guess.
Like, how much are you going to really give them credit?
I don't know. This is the biggest test. Look, I think that this is the biggest test that you faced, even with Texas. But here's one thing that I'll throw in there, Joe. It's not like that. It's not as if that they haven't played tough opponents already, right? Meaning Michigan. I mean, They have.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're a tested football team. So you feel pretty confident on what you know that you're going to get from them, regardless of what's going on at quarterback. So, all right, you want to go down to the largest cocktail party?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Georgia, Florida this weekend in Jacksonville. Cocktail party. Joe, both teams coming off of a bye week. One of the SEC's big rivalries here, Georgia and Florida. Now, obviously, hadn't really lived up to what everybody wants it to live up to because these are two very proud programs, but a lot of hatred in this game. Georgia versus Florida. Joe, how do you see it going down?
Oh, you just brought up the key part here. There's a lot of hatred between these two teams, and kind of makes me wonder.
Jaden Rashada game.
Oh, yeah, it is the Jaden Rashada game. That's funny. That's actually a really interesting thing to bring up here. Do you think at any point Jaden Rashada gets into this football game?
If I think it would be funny if Georgia wins and then gets a ball last, if they send Rashada out there to take a knee.
I would do the complete opposite. I would put Rashada in for the first drive if I was Kirby Smart and if I was trying to really troll him. I don't know. I think that because that'd be like a total mind F. Like that would be like a total like if you really want to rattle the composure of Billy Napier, do that to see how pissed off he'll get. He's probably not going to do this, but I don't know. Kirby's not above something
Kirby
like that.
would do that. I mean, Kirby was on the staff, if I'm not mistaken. They both come from Saban's staff. There's a level of respect because of the little man that I don't think that happens regardless. Okay. But it is the Jaden Rashada game.
It is the Jaden Rashada game. This Florida team's better than I think some people realize. Mm-hmm. Since DJ Langley took over, they've been a little bit more explosive offensively. Not as consistent because Mertz was like 76% completion percentage, but 9.9 yards per attempt. They're able to pick up some pretty big plays. Elijah Badger, Chimere Dike, they both have been pretty quality receivers so far this season, guys to pay attention to. Their offensive line also has only allowed 10 sacks this season. They have quietly been one of the best offensive lines in the SEC and even in the country with how little pressures they're allowing to a true freshman quarterback of all situations. Outside of that, though, I mean, this is Georgia. Georgia should see red and see an opportunity to see their rival and to bury him. When was the last time that this game was like really, really competitive and close? Was that probably under Dan Mullen?
You got about a half last year where this was competitive.
Does that count?
I mean, over 50%, I don't know. But Listen, here's what I'd say. I don't believe in this offensive. Well, how do I want to say this? I don't believe in this offense in the sense of that I don't know if Billy can be the one that schemes things up to beat Georgia. Okay. I do think you're right on one thing. Nobody wants to admit it, but it's true. You're right. They have faced talented defenses. I think Tennessee is a very talented defense. They did some really good things. Now Lagway's in, and it gives you a whole different dynamic, Joe, of what he can be and what he will be. You know, you see the potential, you see the growth, you see the explosive plays and him throwing the ball down the field. And I think that when you look at this game, you look at Florida and just the overall aura that's around that program. Oh, it's Georgia. They're back. And they probably are, because I think Kirby, of all coaches, if there is a coach that has a team in the SEC, which most teams in the SEC this year, Joe, look at what's happened to them after a bye week. They've looked bad. They haven't looked good in the first half of games. However, Joe, I think that there's one glaring weakness here and one glaring hole. That's what she said. But I think there's one glaring weakness. I think that Georgia's going to line up and run it right at them and splatter them. Ron Roberts, for what it's worth in his career, the DC at Florida, they have not been effective at stopping the run game, ever, no matter where he's been. This even going back when he had Pete Golding as his DC at Southeastern Louisiana. Joe, Florida's 94th in the country in rushing defense. They are getting gashed. Even though that they can get after the quarterback, they are really allowing teams to line up and punch them in the mouth. Dylan Sampson in the second half says hello to the statement that I just made. Joe, you saw a Texas team who's got a really good front seven that Georgia had success running the football on. This is not the same. This is not the same opponent here. Here's what I think is going to happen. I do think Georgia's going to get back to who they are. They're going to get back and they're going to start running the football. It is, I said, the Jaden Rashada game. The truth of it is, it's the Trevor Etienne game. Is number one going to line up and bust somebody up? Because I'm going to tell you right now, what I saw going back today and rewatching Georgia versus Texas, Joe, they busted Texas up late in that game. Even with 3 turnovers, they were busting them up inside in that run game. I think that that's going to be what happens here. But here's my concern for Georgia. I don't care how good you are. I don't care how much talent you have. I don't care about how good of a coach Kirby Smart is. If you continue to turn the football over with your quarterback and he continues to have games where he is turning the ball over, at some point it's going to beat you. It's not going to be this week, more than likely. But, Joe, I got to be real with you. Florida, for what it's worth, hasn't necessarily been bad at finding ways to get turnovers. They haven't. They're top 20 in the country in doing so. More than everybody else at what's doing. The ball will pop out of thin air or a ball slips out of your hand. You got to eliminate turnovers here. If you do, not only are you going to win, you're going to cover. And I think that I think Florida, now going into this game with Florida, I think you look at this and say to yourself, all right, now you're coming out of a bye. Who is this real Georgia team? And I think you're about to find out.
Big thing that you mentioned here, Florida's run defense is bad. It's very,
bad.
very bad. They've got talent in their secondary. I'm a fan of Jason Marshall. I think that, he's somebody to monitor, but nail on the head has been hit. They are having a lot of trouble stopping the run. I have been very, very redundant in bringing this up every single week. And Georgia's slowly been getting better at this. Georgia has to run the ball more. And again, they've been getting better at it. This is the perfect opportunity to build confidence in your team's rushing attack, to build confidence and know that we can win in short yardage situations, that we can line up on 2nd and medium and we can pick up that first down on 2nd and 5 because we're going to run through somebody's face. They need to continue to revert back to the offensive approach that made them so successful last year. They got away from a lot of the things that they did last year that worked for them. And I know that the personnel is different. You don't have Brock Bowers. You don't have Ladd McConkey. But for some reason, they have gotten away from running the ball. And I've mentioned it before. They're like one of the lowest teams in rushing play percentage in the country. There's no reason why, when you've got a back like ETN and your offensive line slowly starting to get healthier. I don't know when Tate Ratledge comes back, but when he comes back in that final few games, that stretch of the season, the SEC championship game needs to be when you're hitting your stride as a run-centric team that has the bodies to win in those situations. And then the last thing, you kind of alluded to this, they have played down to their opponents. To particular opponents. But the Texas game reminded me, and it was a big talking point that I had going into the Texas game, is that Kirby and that coaching staff are going to get their focus back. They're going to realize what the issues were. Any situation where they have a reason to take it out on an opponent, they're going to use it. This is that type of a situation. This is a rival. This is a premier game in an NFL. Wait, they still play at the Jaguar Stadium, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Neutral site situation. Regardless, this is the spot, man, where you get everybody bought in and the team all hyped up because you kicked the shit out of Florida.
Here's the only thing I'm going to say. And don't kill me. However, this is the start of a really tough stretch for Florida and Billy Napier. You have Georgia, LSU, Texas, Ole Miss, Florida State, and I get, Florida State, but all in this stretch here down the stretch here. The only thing that I'm going to say is this is Billy Napier's last ride, and there's one thing that every team on that a part of this has got to watch out for. He's gonna go down swinging, and you can't allow for a team like this who is desperate. And Joe, I got to be real with you. Have you heard these players in these press conferences? Dude, Billy has not lost this locker room at all. They love him, and so how does 18 and 21-year-old college athletes react to a coach that they really love and want to go out there and perform for? I don't think that matters from an X's and O's and Jimmy's and Joe's standpoint. However, what I will say is you do have the ultimate dog, the guy that everybody in the team that everybody has written off here, going into arguably the toughest stretch in college football's history. When you look at a 5-game schedule, how does it play out here, man? How does it look? And if you fight like hell, I'm going to give you a lot of respect. But I don't think that you have a chance because I think Georgia's going to line up and run the football on you, and you're going to get whooped up front. That's how I see it going down.
I'd say this would be the nail in the coffin, but it should have been a while ago. The whole administration thing for Florida.
The mismanagement of Tennessee should have been the nail in the coffin. Go into a bye week, come out against a bitter rival in Georgia, and then throw everything else at them, man.
The shit show with their administration is going to save him. So he'll end up be given plenty of extra time. I don't know when that firing is going to happen. It probably won't be after this game.
You got to make a move, man. You still have an athletic director that could fire him when need be. So I don't know, man. I don't know. All right. Let's wrap it up here. We do have a super chat. Did you want to get to Tim Ray? He says, Joe, is Neil Brown still a better coach than James Franklin? I don't think I said that I thought that West Virginia would pull off the upset at the beginning of the year, and I was dead wrong, and I admitted that I was wrong, and I apologize for being wrong. Am I crazy? Did I say that? I don't remember you ever saying that.
You would have remembered if I said something like that, because that's a crazy ass thing.
I'm a James Franklin apologist. I am a James Franklin apologist. He beats every team that he's supposed to and loses to every team he's supposed to.
Is my memory that bad?
I don't think that. No, the way that I remember the whole West Virginia thing happening went a lot different than that comment.
Yeah, everyone was more because that would have. I mean, the way that the West Virginia fans got pissed at you over the Garrett Green comments, I feel like more Penn State fans would have gotten pissed at me.
Just throwing this out there, these Looney Tunes want him benched now.
Well, the other kid, he was hurt, and they started the other kid, and now they all want to fire Neil Brown. Yeah, it's a barnyard ass situation. It's ridiculous how stupid that situation is melted down. But
couldn't happen in the South. That's all I'm going to say. All right, Miami. Oh, let me take this down. Miami versus Duke this weekend. I know that I've already gotten some Miami fans a little riled up in the chat, so I'll start it off here. Joe, I think Miami is a really good football team. Their offense is insane. They can throw the ball. They can run the ball at an effective rate. Their receiver core, like we talked about in the preseason, one of the most underrated units in the country. They are very physical at the line of scrimmage, on both lines of scrimmage. Their defense has played up to this point very good in a lot of situations. However, they have allowed too many big plays. Bottom line, too many big plays are being allowed here. You're right. I don't think that Duke is the team that can come in here and clip them. I just don't see it. However, Joe, it's been a month. You have let 4 teams stick around with you that from a talent v talent standpoint that have zero business being around you, right? There's no reason that these last 4 games that any team should have been around you, regardless of who they are, what you think about those opponents. When you turn on the film and you turn on the tape, you are playing up and down to the level of your opponent. The reason it's doing that is because, Joe, they are getting lost in man-to-man coverage. That is the truth. I don't know why it is. I don't know how it is. I don't know what's going on. But one thing that I know for sure is you're 127th in the country in explosive play rate defensively, allowing explosive plays on you. I mean, Joe, that is a nightmare of a scenario. At some point, that's going to get you clipped. I have no idea when it is. None. It's not this week, but that will get you clipped if you're not careful. But Cam Ward continues to find a way, man. This team continues to find a way. It's not like they haven't been tested. They have been tested. This offense, Joe, is spectacular. So statistics and stats are great, but when you look at the games and the explosive play rate, Joe, that is what's keeping these other teams in the ballgame.
First of all, I'm not worried about – I'm still not really that worried about the explosive play rate thing. I think that there have been teams in the history of college football.
Okay, well, let me rephrase it another way. If you're not worried about explosive play rate, are you in the back of your mind asking questions about, hey, man, you've played 4 straight opponents that have no business staying on the field with you, and you're allowing them to stay in games? How about that question?
Wait. Okay, I think that the Louisville, I just think that there's more context needed for those talking points.
Okay, well, then give the context.
With the opponents that they played, you're going up against a Louisville team, which we have said had one of the best receiving rooms in the country. Okay, one of the most productive receiving rooms in the country.
That's
Virginia
for sure.
Tech has an underrated receiving room and one of the better athletic quarterbacks in the ACC. Cal has one of the most underrated offenses that has kind of petered off a little bit because of injuries. But the big plays that they allowed were because they were going up against, again, a very underrated offense. I'm not trying to make excuses for Miami, but the biggest reason why I'm not worried about stuff like that is because, again, there's a lot of similarities that can be drawn from the way that this team is playing at the current moment for Miami to the way that Washington played last year. And Washington, had plenty of games where they hung around with teams, but they still finished. They still didn't allow their opponent to close out. They stepped up to the plate. They made the plays necessary in crunch time to finish out games and win. Plain and simple. And just to talk about the context of this Duke game more specifically, they've been insanely lucky, like stupidly lucky with the way that they have gotten through this season with the record that they have. They are extremely non-potent. They couldn't be any more non-explosive. They're only averaging 336 total yards of offense per game.
Mm-hmm.
Malik Murphy's been a quality player, but he's only completing 58% or so of his passes.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to be worried about coming into this situation. The real test will come in the ACC championship game. And I know you're not directly saying that, but just to tie this all together, they're not going to get a real test until they play Clemson.
No,
and I think that they're going to beat
Clemson.
I think that they're going to beat Clemson. It's all going to work itself out. I think this Miami team, there's not as much to be worried about.
It's not, and you're right. I'm not worried about them this week. You're right. Look, Duke is 109th in total offense. Joe, they cannot run the football. to save their life, meaning Duke. They can't. And everybody's pointing at Malik Murphy. Well, I just got to throw this out there to you. Malik Murphy, I mean, they're 117th, Joe, in the country in run offense. Right? Like, I mean, they cannot run the football. It's been all on his shoulders. One thing they do well, though, they play really good defense. Joe, they're 13th in the country in passing defense. They've been really good on third down. They're 11th defensively. They have been a little leaky in some areas, but I mean, look, they've given up a lot. Their run defense has given up a lot, but in their secondary, Joe, you got to give it to them. They've been pretty solid, but it's not going to matter here. This is the best offense in the country, without a doubt, the best offense in the country, best scoring offense, best total offense. Cam Ward's going to continue to control this boat here, and they're going to continue to go off on really good spurts and runs here. This is not the team or the game that's going to do that to you. But I want to see you dominate an opponent. I want to see you dominate a lesser opponent. It's time for you to dominate. Joe, what I'm trying to get at here, the ultimate thing I'm trying to get at here, I think you have more than the ability than anybody in the country. You should be able to dominate at will. And this is the game that you should be able to line up and dominate at will. I want to see you for 60 minutes, take it to an opponent's ass and not let up. Because there are people in the national media and the committee, they're like, why are they around in these games? You are better than – you have more talent than any team in the ACC by a long shot. You have the best quarterback in the ACC. Go dominate an opponent for 60 minutes. And Miami, I think, is going to do that, and they will do that. I think that the point here is that I'm trying to make is show me. Show me for, like, I know what you can be. We all are seeing what we know that you can be. Go out there and show it.
Well, that's a good point before we get out of here. This is the game where you kick the crap out of them. Like, this is really the game because it is not a good matchup for Duke. It's really not. Duke is not built to play Miami close. It 1000% isn't. We talked about and we perfectly depicted why Cal could have been close. We misfired on the Virginia Tech game. We perfectly depicted how
we were scorned about Virginia Tech. We were scorned.
We pretty accurately predicted how the Louisville Miami game could have been high scoring and how things played out the way that they did. This game does not match up well for Duke. And Miami, like the way that they played against Florida State, has a chance to smoke them. And what you're saying here, I agree with. Quiet anyone. Quiet Blake. Come out here and quiet Blake and prevent them from having any big plays.
Hold on. Stop.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you.
No, because they'll do it. And all context gets thrown out here. I literally just spent.
Maybe you'll get in the Miami. Maybe you'll get put in the Miami hype video if we.
I mean, I guess everybody wants to continue to do it, but what do I know?
I'm gonna pull a bite out of context of you sounding like you're being negative, and then I'm gonna send it to the Miami guys and say, "Hey guys, Oregon used this last week and they won. So if you'd like, here is Blake and I being negative."
I literally will not allow you back on.
Well, come on.
It will be the Ruffino and Ruffino show.
It's free publicity. It's free publicity. If they Oregon won.
Okay, well, why don't you say it and then you send them a clip of you saying it?
Miami's going to lose this football game. There, I'll clip that and I'll send it to them.
All right. We'll see y'all. Well, actually, tomorrow night we'll see you. Just make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Hit that notification bell and subscribe. We'll see y'all then. Y'all have a good one. Peace.